on. Thanks, Nick. I was just saying, I'm excited to have you on. I've met and talked to and interviewed so many of the speakers already today that this is my first net new one, and so I'm pretty pumped to get some, selfishly something new that I haven't had a chance to have a conversation with. And so today we're talking about the new normal and how to attract talent in a post-COVID world, how it's become even harder. And Nick's he's the founder or co-founder and CEO of the Hunt Club and a new category of referral-based search firm helping companies leverage the power of relationships and connections to find their next great hire. They were founded in 2014 in Chicago, one of my favorite cities. They get a network of 10,000 experts and 5 million candidates, and they've helped over 500 companies find and engage the very best talent. Nick, before we jump in, best blues spot in Chicago?
Oh God, best blues.
If you maybe not best, just like your favorite. Well, there's so many.
There's so many. Wow. What's the place? The Green Mill it's north of the city a bit. It's like the most famous one, so I feel like I'm a cliche. I was digging in to try and find like a one that was like off the radar, but they by far are the best. And then I saw another chat come in, best pizza joint. That's got to be Lou Malnati's. It's the only deep dish worth pizza worth having. So I need to brush up on my blues joints though. I don't sound that cool. God, we're in a great blues city and I don't even know where to go.
I started 3 under the bus there.
Okay. I'm not
the only two I know like Buddy Guy has a place up there, but I know I've been to the Green Mill. That's a really, really sweet place. And then Kingston Mines.
Oh, Kingston Mines is incredible. I used to live right across the street from there, so I frequented it like all the time. I should have said that place. I feel like they just mix it up now so often. They have all sorts of different types of music that I didn't even think about classifying it as blues. But yeah, Kingston Mines is incredible.
That's fair. Totally fair. And like the barbecue out back, like on the backside of that place is amazing.
The food is oddly incredible, and it's even better at 2 a.m., so I highly recommend it.
Definitely. All right. So into the chat, help me out. If you're in Twitch, jump into Slack. But if you're hanging out with us in the Zoom, help us answer a debate. Deep dish pizza. Is it pizza? Is it a casserole? What is it?
Oh man,
I'm sorry, Nick.
The Jon Stewart thing all over again. It's giving me the willies. So we believe it's a pizza. It could play into a casserole in a lot of different instances, but here in Chicago we love it, and we can't eat it that often due to not being as active as I once was. But when we get it, we enjoy it.
Right on. I just love it. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's delicious and amazing. And as Michael is pointing out, it is not a casserole. So I apologize for bringing up these terrible memories.
Along, Michael.
Yeah.
Along as well.
Perfect. So Nick, talk to us about how are we attracting talent in a post-COVID world? How has COVID changed the way you source and find talent?
Yeah, I think it's changing pretty dramatically for a number of different ways. So it's really an excuse. Funny enough, there's actually some bells popping in the background, and they go off every third minute after the hour. So it's just reminding me to stay.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's the world we live in now. So would it be helpful, Colin, if I jumped into some of the slides that we built to chat through that, or is it cool?
That'd be great. Yeah, for sure.
Let's do that, because I think there's a lot of a lot of interesting things happening in the marketplace from a talent perspective and just in general. But really, I'd love to kind of share and walk through some of the thoughts that we have. So we think about talent in a lot of different ways, and like we're just coming off of really an environment that was one of the best capital markets in the history of the world. So it's 10 years of a bull run since the last Great Recession, incredible growth, incredible capital infrastructure, investing in many different things. And then I think obviously the bottom kind of fell out over the course of the last 60 days as a pandemic took over and impacted all sorts of different industries. So we think we've seen a lot of change over the course of the last 60 days from companies that were on incredible trajectories, raising a magic wand and raising tens of millions of dollars, going essentially defunct. We've seen companies that have been bootstrapping along, be in the right time in the right place for a business model that makes sense in this ecosystem and now can't hire fast enough. And we see a lot of different channels and how people are doing that. So I think it's it's been really interesting tracking this market and watching everything from how people source talent to how people actually interview talent to how do you actually negotiate and close and onboard talent in an environment where you've never really met somebody. So it's been a fascinating trajectory and change for our business as we've been like watching everything and trying to adjust with the times. But I think, really we want to set the tone and just kind of discuss that, like, this is unprecedented. I don't want to beat that too much because everyone clearly knows that, but it's changing how people look, think, and find jobs. And I think the really cool thing we did was, a little bit about our model and how we leveraged it for this conversation. So we have over 10,000 business leaders that have signed up for Hunt Club. And so these folks, Colin, are like experts in the community and founders, CEOs, different venture investors. So basically, somebody that's got a great network that's achieved a certain level of prominence or network or background in the business community. And so our model is we basically get them to sign up. They drop their networks in. We build technology to understand the strength of their relationships. And then we make it as seamless as possible for them to refer for our customers' open positions. And we really do this for hundreds of venture-backed companies. And I think the really cool thing that we did was we actually leveraged this community of business leaders instead of to essentially refer talent for our customers' open positions. We actually crowdsourced some information on what they think about the current environment and the future of talent. So I think that's what we're going to be really covering today. So I was excited to dig into that.
Hey, I don't know if you can still hear me, but my Zoom is frozen a little bit here.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
perfect. Yeah, I just can't touch or move the screen or mute myself or see your video. And I apologize to the Twitch crowd who can't see everything. But if you just keep going, I guess you can still hear me and I can still hear you. And I believe they can still see things. So yeah, feel free.
Okay. So maybe I'll work through some of the things we're going to go through today. So, and if anyone needs me to do something else, just throw something in chat. I think that's working. And I think systems are kind of still going on our end. So just let me know. But, so what we set out to do, Colin, was like figure out how do business leaders predict and forecast like what our next new normal is. So we went out and essentially sent a panel survey out to over 100 plus different leaders in our community. And you can kind of see some of the different backgrounds of those leaders. So primarily most were C-level founders or in the C-suite of their different organizations, quite a few senior leaders, SVPs, VPs, and then some directors, both internally at companies and on boards. And so, I think the types of companies that these folks came from were pretty wide and vast, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But, I think to set the tone of what we're trying to really kind of accomplish and talk through, give you guys a sneak peek into like the inside the minds of industry leaders. So what they're thinking about the business and the marketplace, like help look to the future and help understand, different ways that will work and how it's changing. To your first question, how hiring's changing. And then helping kind of the community think about like different ways to owning their growth and building action plans towards like hiring for the next normal. And so, I think that was kind of the plan and then the agenda that we're really looking to cover. And really cool is we got a wide range of different companies and leaders from these companies to actually participate. So whether it was, folks over at Techstars or large public companies like Verizon to, smaller public companies like Pinterest to healthcare companies like Oak Street Health to unicorns like GoPuff. We were able to pull our community and get like a pretty cool widespread cadence and answer from different industries and different spaces. Awesome. So I'll dig into some of the results we found, and they were interesting. So, I think the first is that broadly, and it's positive news, but broadly, I think a lot of leaders in our community were pretty optimistic about the improvement of the economy. And I think in the time frame which it will happen. So, essentially it was close to 60% believe that the economy was going to improve either in Q3, Q4, Q1, Q2 of 2021. So, I think it gives you kind of an interesting outlook on how some of the folks in our expert network thought about, when economic improvement was going to happen. And I think the other point though we want to articulate is that they didn't expect a complete rebound. So it's not going to be like the economy is going to be back to full strength to where it was or even improved upon from that previous position, really for more than a year out. So I think the general community was predicting that we would have economic improvement. but we would take a year plus before it got to the same level of strength of kind of where we were before COVID. And so, I think this one's kind of a no-brainer, but most businesses were caught off guard. We were caught off guard. I know, the hundreds of customers we work with, regardless if they were public companies or just raised their Series A, were all thrown for a bit of a loop, and had to really figure out how to handle, a relatively distressed environment in a new environment where folks are working from home. Their revenue contracted rapidly. Teams were unfortunately getting furloughed or cut. So I think it's there's been a lot of change, and so I think this isn't a big shocker of a slide where most people felt they were unprepared, and there was quite a bit of disruption to their core business. Very few felt minimal disruption. I thought this slide was interesting too. So we talked about business strategy. So you built your 2020 plan, maybe Q4 of 19, and you started to put that into practice towards the end of the year, and certainly the first couple months of the quarter. And then everything kind of was thrown for a loop. So 8 out of 10 businesses that we actually interviewed from a leadership perspective actually completely pivoted their strategy. So in some form or fashion, whether it was medium change to significant change. And so I think that just gives you a sense of how people are framing the overall macro environment and how to make sure that their revenue model, their current burn trajectory, their current customer base, and how they think about serving products or services to them has all changed based on the environment. And it's funny, Aaron and I actually talked about this in a different conversation a while ago, but from a forecasting perspective, everyone's playbooks were thrown out the window. And so we're always curious on, business, especially as you scale, is about predictability as much as it is delivery. And those things are equally important given the size of an infrastructure. And we found after talking to our community that, really most people move to a monthly cadence and how they thought about actually looking at the business and forecasting a lot of their critical metrics, including revenue. So we thought that was kind of an interesting tidbit for the community that was thinking through how to think about their business. Best in class right now seems to be more weekly and monthly than it is anything else, unless you are on a more stable foundation for growth. From a hiring perspective, more than half of businesses paused hiring nearly immediately in the first 2 weeks of some of the initial kind of work from home orders or shelter in place orders. So 53% basically had a full hiring pause. 21% did a partial pause. So for critical functions or critical roles that were in process, continued to see those through. 17% of our base actually only froze all hiring and focused only on leadership hires. And then about 9% of the entire leadership base that we polled actually continued along with full hiring plans without much disturbance or distraction. And some of them actually even accelerated. So, I think you're seeing quite a bit of disruption in trends across the board from businesses and how they chose to continue to interact in this environment. And this, I think, was a really interesting indicator on just the overall sentiment on the labor market. So we asked for those who paused, so those who had to pause or had to stop the traction that they're on, when do they think they'd pick it back up? And so what we found was that, really a majority thought within the next kind of 12-month period starting next quarter, so July 1st. So I think, I think that indicates, some hope. I think for those that were unfortunately impacted by the situation, that a lot of people are kind of sitting in a position to understand and wait and see what this is and how it affects the business in the marketplace. And there's quite a bit of sentiment that that next quarter is really the launching point for when they'll start to, really think about kind of rebuilding some of their teams or driving some headcount growth back to the company. And so I think that looks empirically to what happened over the course of the last, call it 45, 60 days. I think a big part of what we wanted to talk about today was really thinking through the future, owning your growth, but understanding, what's going to happen next and how to manage some of that change. And, I think we loved this statistic. One thing that we always talked about in our business, just dealing with, hundreds of different customers, large and small, is we always thought about this kind of being the watershed moment that changes the dichotomy of how talent works and where you find talent and how talent works with your company. And so, as a founder of a company that works primarily 80% venture-backed Series A, B, C, D, E, and beyond companies scaling fast or growth equity. I think 80% of our customers really pre-COVID had a stigma around like hiring remote. They've seen some of their functions really work well, engineering in particular, or certain elements of product. But most of our customers really had a strong preference, almost a deal breaker in the sense that they wouldn't hire a remote team. They need the person that they had headcount open for to go sit in the office, wherever that office would be. And I think you're seeing it now. You're watching the productivity of teams. You're watching the results of different businesses and the different working motions really start to gel and glue. And I think what we found was almost everybody was pretty amenable to the idea that like remote work will be widely accepted. And I think the interesting thing about that is that opens up the talent pool dramatically for companies based in the Bay Area that are looking for great engineering talent that just graduated from Big Ten schools across the Midwest, but maybe don't want to go take residence in the Bay Area, or companies in New York that are trying to find great ad tech talent, but don't necessarily want to build an office or hire folks that come from there and really distribute who they're looking for. So I think it's going to really change the game and how people think about building their teams, and really focus on skills versus specific things around location or blockers or barriers that traditionally impacted a process. So I think you'll see transparency at work for pressures at home. So I think it's 84% felt that the transparency of being in a living room or in a, having church bells in the background or talking about pizza as your wife walks by and asks you what you want for dinner is going to be more common and integrated into how we communicate and how we work in an environment. So there'll be more transparency and pressure for evolving, I think, some of the cadences of like what is professionalism and working from home. Servant leadership will replace traditional leadership. So I think, this was an interesting poll for us where it's when you're building a culture and organization that will be more distributed and more digital and transformative than ever before. I think leaders are going to have to evolve their styles. They're going to have to evolve transparency into what they're working on. They're going to have to evolve their communication patterns in how they share and what they share. They're going to have to make themselves present in different ways than traditionally you'd find where, if your CEO or your founder's in the office, you can walk by, give a high five, share a laugh, hit the water cooler, grab a beer, whatever it might be, right? Like that doesn't really exist in this landscape. So I think really great leaders are going to have to find unique ways to stay plugged and cultured and connected with their community and their team. And they're going to have to do so in a way of serving their team and employee base first. And so I think a big percentage of folks, 79%, really felt that agile scenario planning rather than like longer term planning was going to be a big part of how people really think about building their businesses in the future. And I think an interesting kind of subconscious or subtext of this would be, I think predictability is going to go away for a bit now as for a lot of different business models as we try and understand what is next. And so I think people are really going to try and have to be evolved and be more agile, or really think about business models that don't require millions of dollars of capital in order to create a profit or produce revenue. I think people are going to have to be really thoughtful in how they think about investing to build in the future. And I think many continue to talk about video calls being the primary way in which we communicate. And I think everyone's seeing that and feeling that and joining webinars and participating there. And it's going to be a big part of how we interact in the go forward. So the business strategy of most companies changed overnight. And so we think about the way your hire has to actually change too quite a bit. And we're seeing this firsthand with some of our customers who are already like instituting different processes that are best in class. And we're seeing those that are reticent to change and afraid to modify some of their existing processes, and watching them fall behind or losing great talent that actually wants to work to their organization for someone that's more, or an organization that's more future forward. So, I think really talking about some of the trends from the community, we thought around 63% essentially indicated that like skills are going to be the way people think about hiring in the future. Geography, for the most part, will likely be thrown out the window. I think people are going to start to believe that best talent wins regardless of location, and it's going to change the way that companies have interacted. It's going to change the fixed cost structures of companies. It's going to change the commercial real estate industry, certainly. And I think it's going to change the home work environment dramatically. So it's, they're going to think about no longer who's the best person in Chicago for a role that can go to Green Mill with me and enjoy a deep dish pizza, but like, who's the best person in the world for this particular role? And you're seeing everybody's management motions and structures adapt to be able to ingest remote talent. So 74%, we're going to lean even heavier on referral-based talent or referral-based solutions versus some of the traditional job boards or some of the traditional methodologies to source talent. And I think a big leading indicator for that is the volume of inbound talent right now, given the unemployment rate, is astronomical. So some of the statistics that we found were traditional volume of applications on job boards are up somewhere between 70 to 80%, which means that if you're traditionally getting, say, 100 applicants for a LinkedIn post, maybe you're getting 170 to 180 now. And it's overwhelming hiring managers. It's overwhelming recruiters. So I think what we'll find is that companies are going to look for curated, companies are going to look for high quality and trust, and they're going to look for ways to not have to sort through 170 applications to find a winner, but like really focus on different channels, methodologies, and partners that can deliver trusted referral talent. Because with this pandemic, unfortunately, creates a lot more inbound from those seeking their next thing or those seeking for companies or pastures that are a little more stable. So 70% believe talent will seek digitally savvy organizations rather than big name brands. I think one of the really interesting trend lines in the stock market now that I know everyone's kind of following that to be a leading indicator for the macro economy is if you look at like the way that FANG, so Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft,
Google,
Netflix, some of the larger tech companies have recovered. Many of them actually recovered fully and have accelerated around their initial pricing from 45 days ago, where a lot of the broader publicly traded companies are still trying to play catch up and have lost maybe 20 to 40% of their value from where they were. And so I think with that is showing the community in the world that the next phase and the watershed moment for everybody is to figure out how to digitally enable their business or be a tech company or some form of fashion. So I think it's going to start to shift people's expectations to go work for companies like that. And then 45% of them expect to extend offers without ever meeting people. So I think, it's funny, like you never thought you'd hear that, but it's now about interacting virtually and getting to know somebody through a screen and like building a relationship and a process that allows you to hire people wherever they are. And I think that number is going to increase over the year where maybe it's 60, 70% of people become comfortable with extending offers and hiring. So a couple quick hits. So attracting talent is always going to be difficult, but actually it's going to be harder for a lot of this community probably listening in a post-COVID environment, believe it or not. So in-demand roles will still be competitive, and I think the noise will sort of pollute the signal of like who could be great. So you're going to have to figure out a way to navigate the hundreds of accessible candidates looking for different things using different solutions. We see it all the time with some of our customers right now, where they're getting essentially resume review fatigue or high volume inbound fatigue. So we're seeing some of our customers that are navigating and still internalizing lots of their hiring. Their time to fill actually increased, not just because of the high volume of resumes, but actually because the actual process has now been extended, given they're trying to figure out how to really run an airtight virtual hiring process. Passive candidates are those that still are employed at their companies in a lot of degrees, are either have a new level of loyalty or appreciation for the environment that they're in, given everything going on, or a little bit afraid to now look at what might be next, given sometimes the devil that is worse than the devil that you don't. And so I think we're finding that it's no longer a candidate's market; it's more of a company's market now, which means folks are a little bit more reticent to actually pick their head up and start interviewing at different places. And I think then the big thing is the stakes are quite a bit different in hire for hiring leaders or really anybody at this point, because it's you can no longer integrate somebody in a culture that you're used to building and manage. You're going to have to hire them virtually and figure out a way to make sure that the job description is clear, or the accountability is clear, the metrics in which someone's held accountable for is clear. There's a whole new level of operational rigor that companies are going to have to evolve into. that maybe have been subsidized over, millions of dollars of venture capital that was readily available and allowing you to operate inefficiently. Now, in order to really get it right and build a great company and culture, you're going to have to really have some operational rigor and clarity on how you hire and what they do. And so I think, quickly owning your next growth and next normal. So we think about refining your screening process. So how do you really build a screening process and a hiring process that allows you to really find the best talent and not get fatigued and miss folks because you're too busy coming through hundreds of resumes. So employing different filtering tools and processes and different technology out there allows you to really sharpen the right fit and surface those profiles to the top is going to be a huge part of what drives successful hiring in the future. We believe at Hunt Club that there's no better referral process or filtering process than a genuine referral from somebody you trust. So we think that's going to be a big part of it. And so I think, that goes into most of our customers thinking through that, like they need to invest and index on building out their referral engines and their trust engines to make sure that they can get the best people that are tethered through some sort of trusted introduction that they know can handle an ambiguous environment, which is any new job for anybody in this environment is a big leap. So I think it requires trust to know that it's going to work out on both sides. And we believe that we'll see quite a bit of investment in different referral solutions. And I think our audience is actually seeing that too. So I think there's going to be a change, right? The whole world has thought about how do you activate a passive candidate over the last decade. I think that's never going away. There's a lot of incredibly talented people that are currently very happily employed. I think the interesting thing we will find though is that now for the first time, people will pick up their heads for active talent as well. So really talent that is available in the marketplace and is incredible, but because of a lack of financing or a number of reasons, maybe is seeking their next thing. And I think, that's not a no-brainer. Or that is a no-brainer. Everyone probably understands that, but it's going to change the way that people at least think about hiring. So it's going to have to be a dual model. And I think this is a really important one. So choose a selective hiring process versus freeze. I think a lot of game-changing companies have been built in downturns, recessions, or in moments of crisis. And so I think, in these environments or moments, you can actually win some pretty incredible talent that may have not traditionally considered your company. So we believe that if it's a core function, if it's a critical competency, if it's something that's a game changer for your company, this is an environment where a lot of people would be willing to do creative things to figure out, how to build something together. So we believe that companies should be open to hiring in a creative way, even if they're on some sort of freeze, because you never know when that next game changer can kind of come across your business and increase enterprise value by an order of magnitude because of what they can bring to the table. So being open is important if it's so critical for your business. Obviously, if your company can't hire at all or is contracted down to a level where it's just a waste of time to be talking with folks, transparency is always important there. And then, I think this is an important moment. A lot of people run to short-term staffing, or a lot of people run to temporary labor in these environments. And we actually believe you should double down on maybe freelancers for things that aren't a core competency, but for things that are core function or competency, the level of talent that you now have available is awesome and is more active. So there's quite a few creative solutions that you can do to bring on FTE or full-time folks to your business now that you've exercised and built a way to hire and onboard talent anywhere across the country. And there's a wide variety of talent now available that's done some pretty incredible things. So I think, we think that you should double down on great FTE or full-time teammates for core competencies, and then, maybe double down on freelancers in areas that aren't a core competency for your business. And lastly, I think succession planning is key. So you're seeing a lot of CEOs of companies or founders of companies, and this is less in the tech sector, but more in traditional businesses or small businesses, using this as a tool to actually retire. You're seeing actually a lot of public company executives that will probably have quite a bit of turnover over the course of the next 6-12 months. Two indicators, the first being, boards are really watching how they're handling a crisis and determining if they're the leader that they want in the seat. And then the second, a lot of folks just don't want the stress of rebuilding. So I think you're going to see quite a bit of turnover in the public markets and in the small business markets. And I think that's going to create succession planning being even more critical for companies to think about who takes the next seat in whatever leadership role or function or takes over a business. So it's going to be key for many different types of companies. Those are just two trends on how we think about it. And then I think lastly, reconsider benefit offering. So like build a remote infrastructure, offer people unique and clever ways to do things at home or to showcase, creating a digital culture and a remote culture. And that's going to help you as a business land some of this great talent. That's it. So that's kind of the thought. I tried to tie that into a tight 30, but really we believe that a lot of the world's changing, and but it's changing for the better too, where people have the flexibility and the freedom to get that incredible job they want, but maybe do it anywhere. So we're excited to be a part of that rhetoric, and really excited to be able to share what we found today.
Beautiful and well said, Nick. Thank you so much for doing this. If we've got some people here in the Twitch, some people here in the chat. Let's take a minute now. We've got a few until Nick's got to drop, but let's see if we got any questions that we can direct towards Nick before we send him on his way. And he will be in the queue. He will be in. His slides are in the Slack group. If anybody has any questions, I'm just gonna have a quick look in there for some questions. I'm seeing some things pop in the QA.
Yeah, we've got one. I've got one for best practices for onboarding new hires remotely from Tarek. Thanks, Tarek. He said, great job too. I appreciate you, Tarek. So Tarek, the best practices for onboarding new hires remotely, really, we think of it as like three different things that you can do to make sure that the new folks that you bring on your team are well equipped to be successful in your company or your culture. And this is a framework independent of function. So regardless of sales, marketing, or whatever finance or whatever function they join. So the first is getting tighter on developing ways to integrate them cross-functionally across the entire business. So really sharpening the plan to have conversations and setting up conversations for new hires across every single function of the business so they can understand and meet people and understand what they're working on. I think the second thing is really clearly articulating what the KPIs and the metrics, the role and the function are, and what are the different stakeholders that they'll need to interact with cross-collaboratively in order to be successful. So, there's no more water cooler talks. There's no more grabbing somebody and saying you need help. Like you'd have a new level of operational rigor and comms and working with folks. So understanding who your cross-functional stakeholders are and building relationships digitally, super important. And I think the final thing really is, really active leadership doing a great job of making sure that they're getting settled in and ingrained in the culture and making yourself as a leader. I know you're a CEO of a great company, but making yourself as a leader to make yourself available for everybody that walks in the door, certainly the first couple of months, but hopefully beyond that.
So we got another one here from Carolyn. She's asking, how can you expect new hire loyalty once the recruitment market switches back to the candidate market? Tech brought them in, but will it keep them?
Yeah, I think like loyalty for a candidate comes back to like some of the cultural things that we talked about. So if you're setting up the right digital infrastructure, if you're a transparent and a servant leader, Carolyn, if you're setting people up for foundational organizational success in your company, I think actually candidate loyalty is the same regardless if it's a buyer's market or a seller's market. I think it's like leaders in today's world need to use this time to set up their corporate infrastructure or their business infrastructure to make sure that they can retain great talent regardless if it's a candidate's market or not. So I think certainly when the market does come back and money starts flowing again and things are getting funded and people are throwing dollars and cents at folks, I think it will turn some heads to look at new opportunities. But I also think like it's also going to change what people value, right? And sometimes people will value the business they built, the flexibility they have, or the company that they know, as long as companies take care of them, versus really trying to arbitrage the next financial opportunity. So I think it certainly will change a little bit, but I actually think this experience for many is going to deepen loyalty with employees and teammates and candidates. And I actually think it'll be a bit longer to be an active market.
Awesome. We got one more here and then we're going to call it. So Sophia says, hey, Nick, thank you for your presentation. What do you think about the future of hiring in technology consulting companies? Do you think it's going to be more difficult for us, less difficult, the same?
Technology consulting companies. So I'll give two answers just because I'm not 100% clear. So we'll assume it's technology strategy consulting, then we'll assume it's technology engineering, providing, and development work. So I actually think from a strategy perspective, I think hiring is going to be difficult because you're going to be competing with a lot of companies on both frontiers, both engineering and just corporate jobs or strategy roles, to get that same level of aptitude and knowledge base in their companies. You know, if you look at like some of the statistics, as I mentioned, like a lot of tech companies have actually recovered in a V trajectory and are higher than where they were, you know, certainly 20 days ago or 40 days ago. So I think you're going to be competing with a lot of different talent on the engineering side and on the internal company side. So I think it's from tech perspective, we still see a deficit in the marketplace where there aren't enough digitally native skills or enough people with these skills to succeed in those environments. So it's still going to be a bit of a war on talent in that sector. And I think that war actually just got escalated because every company is going to need to be a digital company or digitally enabled company to be successful in the future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you there. I mean, I think I saw there was like when COVID first hit, I saw a couple of memes around, they were floating around that it was like the frustrated IT guy sitting and he's like, I've been working for 15 years to try and push our company, remote and digital. And like all it took was one pandemic.
Yeah. And everything just changed like that. Yeah, it's funny. And then those that were set up were able to do it seamlessly, and those that were apathetic towards it are still scrambling. So it's crazy how the behaviors change. And I'll be honest, like even as like a founder of a company that could be totally remote and distributed, I was really reticent to build that type of environment from a culture perspective. And this has been eye-opening for me. So I think I'm part of that group that's really kind of changing their tune of what's possible. And I think it's going to open up tremendous talent opportunities.
I couldn't agree more. We've always had been a remote friendly company, but haven't been remote first, which has sort of made this two-tier sort of class system of people that work in the head office or near the head office and can come in, and people that are remote. And it almost made the remote people second-class citizens in some ways. And we had kind of two major offices, and there's a lot of complications between, like trying to build the culture between two offices and maintain the culture when the center of gravity starts to get split. And I actually think our company, I was in the same boat as you. I was the one that was anchoring the culture and the team to an office in a specific location. And COVID has proven that I was foolish in that, because I think you could make a very strong argument that we're actually a better company now than we were 8 weeks ago or 9-10 weeks ago, whenever this started. I can't keep track of anything anymore. It's forced us to.
Don't worry, Colin. We're all on the same boat together.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know I just can't remember how long we've been on the boat. But
that is an excellent point. I'd like to get off the boat, go to an island for a few days, maybe get back on the boat after, but at some point we'll be off the boat.
Yeah, even just a float in the water, maybe a snorkel, a tiki cocktail on the beach would be fantastic.
Yes, I'm with you there.
Right on. Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. This was great. If people want to get in touch, they want to copy the slides, is it okay if we share them?
Yeah, of course. Send them on. And if anyone's interested in how we're thinking about best practices around digital hiring, or thinking about how to land that next great referred talent, it's just hunclub.com. I'm Nick at hunclub.com. And we're excited to share the things we're learning with anybody, and certainly with your community, and appreciate you having us on.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Nick.
Awesome. Thanks a ton.
Right on. See ya.